Today's guest is Felicity Lawson. Felicity is an adopted person born at Hornsby Hospital in New South Wales in 1975. Over the past 32 years, she has searched for and found both her mother and father, as well as extended family. A long and complex journey marked by ups, downs, and hurdles. Felicity is currently writing a resource book about adoption reunion in Australia, focusing on local adoptions from the forced adoption era from the 90s and into the 90s. The book aims to give voice not only to adopted people, but also to parents separated from their children by adoption, adoptive parents, siblings, partners, and extended family members, so anyone touched by the reunion process. Today, Felicity joins us to share her own story, what reunion has taught her, and how others can contribute to this important project. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Felicity.
Thank you very much for having me.
Felicity, the book is a very significant undertaking, and your desire to write it suggests to me that your own reunion journey has been deeply impactful. So I thought we might start at the beginning of your story and go into that a little bit. Can you tell us about your childhood?
Well, I would describe it as the ideal childhood. Was brought up in a nice leafy area in Sydney and had two older brothers that were also adopted. And in those days, back in the good old days, everything was so much simpler. We were able to roam the streets and we had BMX tracks in the bush, backyard cricket, had that typical nuclear parent family where my dad was the breadwinner, went off to work every day, and my mum was the one dropping off, picking up, baking, building cubby houses, sewing our clothes, and the typical sibling fights along the way. So yeah, there was a lot of kids in the neighbourhood, so we all sort of banded together and swam in everyone's pools, and yeah, I had no complaints.
What kind of messages were you given about being adopted?
It was something that my brothers and I always knew, so I can't really recall the time when we were told we were adopted, but it was still quite a secretive process. So I remember, and I can't recall any ages, but going through my mum's top drawer and finding these bits of paper all folded up in an envelope, and they were her shorthand. She used to be a legal secretary, so she had her unique way of writing words, and I could tell it was about my adoption, but I couldn't read it all because it was in this shorthand. But I thought, why is that at the back of her drawer? So I quickly shoved it back in. But we all got that message of we were so special and we were chosen, and that our mothers just weren't able to look after us. And that's why we were adopted. They never used the words given away.
So a lot of us out there have been told we were special or chosen. How did those narratives sit with you as a child?
And when I was young, I used to think, wow, that's so great. How special am I that I got chosen into this family? So it felt really special. But as I got older and I suppose started becoming more aware of who I was as a teenager, I quickly realized to be chosen meant that I was available to be chosen. So that made me quite angry about why I just always thought that your mother was the one person that would always love you and protect you. And I just couldn't work out why mine wasn't able to do that.
Yeah. You shared with me that things really shifted for you when your adoptive mother fell pregnant when you were 12. What changed for you at that time?
It's the family joke that we had been waiting to go overseas. Like we'd never been overseas, and my mum was from England. And so she always said, we'll go overseas, we'll go overseas. And then one night we're all sitting at the table together and my dad says, we've got this fabulous news. And so I was 12 and my brothers were 14 and 16. And they said, we're having a baby. And there was just silence. And I remember looking at my brother saying, what the heck? This is so embarrassing. How am I going to tell my friends that my parents actually have sex? This is like unbelievable. Like, what are we going to explain? And I don't really remember the pregnancy as such, except for my mum went all alternative and stopped dyeing her hair. So then she had grey hair, pregnant. And yeah, it was When my sister was born, though, apparently I don't recall any of this, but I was told that I wouldn't acknowledge her, pick her up, didn't really want to interact with her. But I can see lots of photos of her as a toddler and me. And growing up, I was very protective of her when she was little. But yeah, apparently in that very first stage, I was very sour, like a cat, when you bring home a new kitten or a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did it affect your sense of belonging?
Oh, I really, at the time, had no concept of all these things, but I just went off the rails between 12 and 18, very difficult. My schooling went right down. I was, really in really good grades up until year 9, and then um, everything sort of just went haywire, and it I was angry, I think, looking back, just so angry. And when I think about it later on in life, I feel that I just couldn't understand how my brothers and I were not enough. That they always said we were enough and they loved us and we were special and chosen. So then why did they continue to go on and want to try and have their own child? Even though they were very fortunate, they kept saying about to have us 3. So I felt like maybe we weren't enough because they went on to have their own child, which I know sounds irrational because every mother who wants to have a child wants to be able to have their own child. But at the time, I think that's why I was so angry.
Yeah. I had a really similar experience, sort of. When I was young, I think I was about, I'm going to say 9 years old, somewhere between 9 and 10. And my adoptive parents went quite far down the road of considering fostering 2 children. And so far as they came out to our farm at Brookstead to visit us on the farm, and I was sour about it. Because people had thrown doubt into my mind at school once that adoption was like fostering and my parents could give me back, and I couldn't understand why they were bringing another one in. And if they could go back, does that mean I could go back? And yeah, so I remember having some really strong feelings around that too. And thankfully, I guess, we moved from the farm around the same time. Things changed for us markedly in that moment, and we didn't go any further down that road. So I don't know what would have happened if it had gone ahead.
Mm. And
Yeah.
it's also hard. My brothers and I have memories of going to the hospital with my mum. So I don't know how many years of IVF she did or how many cycles, but we do recall sitting in the corridors waiting for her to get, I don't know, blood tests, hormone treatment. And I feel for my mum a lot because that was her right to want to have a child. But yeah, I think it created more confusion about how important and how loved you were. Not that I don't count that she definitely does love us. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it can change how we see ourselves in our families. Do you remember how it changed how you saw yourself in your family?
I think I was really angry with my sister coming because I was the only girl grandchild and cousin, and I was the youngest. So my place in the family went from being the youngest at 12 to all of a sudden now there's another young one and she's a girl and she's biological. Like it couldn't get much worse.
It's a lot of displacement. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was very angry.
Yeah. So, what prompted you to begin searching for your biological mother?
I think as that teenage time, I was horrible. I said some really horrible things to my mum, which I'm not proud of, in arguments that, you're not my real mother, so you can't tell me what to do. You don't even know who I am. You don't even look like me. Whenever she would complain about my behavior, I say, well, obviously it's not from you, it's from someone else, things like that. And I just had this really strong desire just to understand why. Why was I in this position? Second to that was, who did I look like? Because my brothers and I all looked totally different. And it would be common in family photos when you're showing people your photos, people go, oh, who are those people? I go, well, they're my brothers. No, they're not. They don't look anything like you. And I just had it last year. My brother and I went to a wake, and people who we didn't know, we were all talking, and they thought that we were a couple because we were familiar and close. And I said, no, that's my brother. And they were like, good joke. So yeah, it was very hard. There was no mirroring in our family. I was the only one with brown eyes. I had blonde hair. Luckily, one of my brothers had blonde hair. My mum and dad and my other brother had brown hair. So it was just desperately wanted to know why and who I looked like.
Yeah. Do you think, a lot of adopted people go out saying, I'm looking for medical history or for some answers because that's something else that we're looking for can sometimes be harder to name or harder to admit or makes us very vulnerable, and that's that we're also looking for connection? Was there a need for connection in there as well?
No, which is like when I look back at an 18-year-old, I kick myself. And this is part of this whole reunion journey because I found my mother when I was 18, and then I found my father 5 years ago, so 46. So totally different stages in life and total different expectations. And I read some letters that my mum wrote to me on reunion back in 1993, and I feel so ashamed of my reaction. I obviously haven't seen my letters to her. I haven't reread those, but she was so loving and so open to the reunion. And I just, as soon as I had the information I was finding of why and who I look like, I just went back, shut into a compartment and went on with my life. Um,
So what did that reunion look like in reality compared to what you imagined at that time?
well, I had only just finished school. I had left home when I was still at school because things were so bad. And so I was in survival mode, I think, for myself, just paying rent, paying a car, working 3 jobs, and all of this stuff. So I look back at the dates that I applied for my information. It's all at the end of my year 12. And my mother didn't live in the same state. And so the pen pal was good. And then because I went into it in my mind with only needing this why and who I look like, when I got that information, I was satisfied for that time. And she wasn't. And she wanted to meet and wanted to call all the time. And I felt very overwhelmed and felt like there was a lot of pressure and I wasn't ready for that pressure. And looking back, I should have reached out to someone to discuss the feelings and what shall I do and maybe get an intermediate person. But at the time, I just stopped responding.
Yeah. It can be such mixed and difficult messaging at that time, and we've got a saying at Jigsaw that reunion should happen at the pace of the slowest person. And of course, as you highlighted, depending where you are in your life, your age, what's going on in your life will depend on what that pace is like for you and how far you want to take it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wasn't ready. I feel like I was already damaged from my teenage life. Like I had to get through that and work out who I was and what I wanted in life. And
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to take on this whole other chapter.
So, what did your mother share about the circumstances of your adoption?
She just mentioned that she was young, she was still in the middle of a cadetship. She didn't have the resources to be able to take care of me. She didn't tell her parents in the beginning, but ended up telling them towards the end of the pregnancy because there were some complications. And that was the hardest decision that she had to make. And not a day went past where she didn't think about me. And she said of my father that they had dated for a short time, but when she fell pregnant, the circumstances changed. And that's it.
Yeah. How did that information land for you at the time?
I think it was fine because people have relationships all the time and short ones, long ones, things happen. Yeah. And I think I didn't understand about the forced adoption era back then, but I think if you were still at work and didn't have the capacity of the other partner to share responsibility and family support, then no one, even in a society that treats women well, you wouldn't have been able to do it either, I don't think. without all of that support.
So, how has that relationship evolved over time?
It's been very tricky. It's been a very, very difficult relationship, and we've sort of come together, come apart, come together. We've met twice. I actually have a good contact with her children. They were only 12 and 14 when I made contact. In particular, the one that's 2 now, we're quite close. Not 2 now, she was 2. And I think looking back, she was right in one of her emails that she sent to me that I only ever made contact when I wanted information out of her. She didn't feel that I, at any point in time, was trying to get to know her as a person, and that I was just constantly bombarding her. Yeah, it was really hard when my children were born, which was the most amazing experience, having my own flesh and blood. These were the first biological people that I'd ever met in my life. So for me, it was really special. But then they had the normal childhood, like asthma, bronchiolitis, chronic chest conditions. And then, yeah, I found it really difficult not being able to support and help them with a proper medical history. So I made contact with my mother again. And that's when, looking back in hindsight, I can understand her frustration about only ever contacting her about more information, more questions, more answers, whys. And she made the comment in one email that I never make the effort to get to know her, which was valid, absolutely valid. So yeah, we have had ups and downs over the last 30 plus years, but I'm hopeful that we have drawn a line in the sand and can start again. I sent her an email last year or beginning of this year apologizing that it's taken me this long to understand that I've never come to her acknowledging her needs and her concerns always coming from my needs, and that I was sorry. Also acknowledging that we may never be able to have a relationship. It might just be too hard, and that was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what have those relationships taught you about reunion?
It's taught me that you have to be really open to be able to listen and try not to think about it with just your lens. I think personality wise, that is difficult for me, that I always see things first from my perspective and then listen to others. So a lot of my journey, the last probably 2 decades, is trying to learn to listen and look from other people's perspective first. So yeah, from a reunion perspective, particularly for this space with the trauma that the mothers have been through, that you really have to go right from the beginning, bare basics, and actually not have expectations at all, and try to build a really strong foundation rather than coming at the top. It's like Jenga, like pulling a piece at the top and then everything just collapses underneath. So yeah.
Yeah. I always think with reunion, there's these big amounts of time, these gaps from when we apply for information to when we get it, from when we get, apply for records and they arrive.
Yeah.
And it can seem like really dead air time if we just don't do anything with it, but it could actually be seen as very valuable time as far as learning about reunion and expectations and considering the other person's point of view and getting support. If we see it that way and invest in that time, it can make a huge impact on what happens at the other end when you do reunite, or maybe even get an answer no, with helping us to process that no.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree. I agree.
So, what drew you then to search for your biological father?
Part of it was just my need to close the gap and have a complete record. That's been a frustrating part. I know of a lot of people, adopted people, that we just don't have access to all this information that everyone else seems to take for granted because they don't understand that no one questions their identity. No one, they ring up and they have the answer. So I went looking. I used Park to help look for the man that was named in the information.
For
And
listeners, that's post-adoption resource centre in New South Wales, correct? Yeah.
correct, yeah. That's the service I used because I was born in New South Wales. And yes, they found him relatively quickly. I was like blown away. And so then they suggested it's always wise to do a DNA test, which we did, and it was negative. And I was absolutely like, I was broken, so broken that this person's name, who I'd always seen from that day that I looked in my mum's drawer and saw the name. And then you have these visuals and you have this fantasy of what this person looks like and how tall they are and what they like. And then to find out it wasn't him, and he was equally as devastated because he also thought that he had a child out there, to find out that he didn't. He
Yeah. So you didn't stop there, though.
no.
Can you tell us about your next steps and what happened in the next chapter of searching?
Well, straight after that, I thought, oh, DNA. Well, that must be a way to find people. So I did a DNA test with Ancestry, and I just had to sit and wait. And my counsellor from Park, who was brilliant, was always sort of counselling me for years about sometimes you just have to let go. Sometimes you're never going to find this person. And I just said, I'm not stopping till I'm about 68, because then I figured that person may be deceased or just too old and not be able to find him. And so I just said, I'm determined. I am going to do this. And then I just waited until one day I got this little match that, I mean, anyone who's done the Ancestry, all your matches are tiny, but it was a bigger tiny of the norm. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not on my maternal side. This is definitely my paternal side. So I got butcher's paper from the training department at my office and put them all up over the walls and did family trees. And it was very confusing. And I thought, I cannot solve this. And reached out to the Adoption in Australia search group on Facebook. And within a week, they had it solved down to 2 potential men.
So how has that reunion gone?
Yeah, it's been very different to my birth mothers. It happened in the COVID time. So, as you were talking before about having space and time, because borders were closed, we had to rely on phone calls. So, over 3 months, we had regular phone calls, getting to know each other and just talking about anything, which was great. And then meeting him later in life, I think, and also learning all the things that I'd learnt that I did wrong in my birth mother's reunion. And I'm a totally different person at 50 or 46 I was than at 18. So maturity helps. So yeah, it's been great. And also he didn't know I existed at all. So when he found out about me, it was like a total shock that he didn't even know that I was out there. So I think he's not got that shame, guilt narrative that others do.
Yeah. You said something earlier that I would venture to say most adopted people would agree with, that they weren't initially aware of the broader context of forced adoption and that era and what occurred at that time. When you learned about that era and the kind of forces that were up against, that unmarried women were up against, how did that reshape your understanding of your mother's situation?
I was heartbroken for her. I had no idea about the first adoption era. We were just never told that. And we were always told by our parents it was just a young lady who wasn't able to take care of you. So to then find out the scale of the practices of that time, and to find out that the unmarried mother's home that she was sent to was one named many times in the report of 2012. Absolutely. I cried for days. I just could not believe that that actually happened. I'm really happy that there's been the report and the apology. But I don't feel that the wider society even understands what happened for our own mothers in that era. Yeah. So I have nothing but compassion for all of the birth mums who experienced that. Yeah.
At what point, Felicity, did you realize that your experience wasn't just personal, but part of a larger story that needed documenting?
I think with this reunion with my birth father, because as I mentioned with my birth mother's children, they were all young. So particularly the one that was 2, she's grown up knowing that I've always existed. And the others, they were teenagers. So I've always been on the fringe of the family. But the experience with my birth father's family, they were older. So I think they were 34 and 36. And had already started their own families and well established in life. And at first, everything went really well. And then all of a sudden, it didn't go really well. And I just thought, wow, this is odd. Like, I don't understand why this situation's happening, because it didn't happen with my other siblings. They all love me and accept me. And I found it really confronting and really hard to navigate. And rejection, well, for me, is one of my biggest react triggers. So yeah, I just found it really difficult. And then I thought, I can't just be me. Like I was fairly fortunate with my siblings of my first reunion that it's all gone quite well. And then I felt a bit blindsided really to it. And then I just thought, this can't be me, can't just be me, my experience. And why isn't there more information about, okay, you meet your birth mother or birth father, and then what? Like, it doesn't stop then. And then as your reunion process, like mine has been 30 years with my birth mother, then you go through so many different stages of life through that time, and we all change. So then what? Like, how do these relationships keep evolving and changing through those stages of life?
Yeah. So, what gap are you hoping that this book will fill?
Trying to look at it, the reunion from all perspectives. So I know still with time, when I searched for my birth father, I was still absolutely focused on finding who he is, what he's doing, what he's like, what he looks like. I still did not give a lot of thought into, oh, is he married? I wonder if I have a grandma and a grandpa. And yeah, I just really want to open up people's minds to, it's not just the initial reunion, it's the ripple effect.
Yeah, that's it. It has a much deeper impact. And that's what we find as a support service now, is that we're getting a lot of contact from not the 3 key players, the adoptee, the mother and father, but also from siblings, other children of grandparents, aunts, uncles, all sorts of people who are also impacted.
Mhm.
Yeah. So now you're not collecting individual narrative chapters per se, but structured responses. What does that mean?
Well, when I thought about the layout of the book, I figured everyone's story is so unique. We all, grow up in different areas and have different family, like you're at different orders in the family and other siblings, adopted, not adopted. So from a reader perspective, I wasn't sure how that would be helpful to gain anything out of it apart from reading individual stories. So with the help of some of the counsellors from Park, we thought that using a theme approach would be easier for a reader to navigate. So that way we've picked 5 common themes in adoption and adoption reunion. And then I've reached out trying to find people in every category of relationship. So if you're have just done a DNA test and you've discovered you've got a half sibling, then you go, oh my gosh, how could I approach this? Then with this book, you could go to the sibling section and read all the different experiences and insights on those themes.
Yeah. So can you explain to me, how can people contribute?
They can send me an email at adoptionreunion@outlook.com. And just express their interest, and then I send them the consent form. And then this week, for those who have already consented, I think it's 38 as of today, they'll get it's a survey There's some tick boxes, some free text. It should take about half an hour to complete. It obviously depends on how much information you put in. And then I get the job of collating it all together.
And so can you give us a bit of a taste test of what participation would involve?
Participation is obviously signing the consent, and then the survey comes to you. So the survey, I've just finished writing them all up today, is in a program called Microsoft Forms, which anyone can open from their browser. You can choose to be identified or de-identified. It asks some general reunion questions such as, were you the one searching or were you found? And then it goes into the 4 different themes about hidden grief and loss, rejection, shame and guilt, navigating new relationships, and any sort of learnings that you might have. So, it's quite comprehensive. I thought in the beginning I'd just ask 5 questions, and then there's probably about 25 questions, but there's a third of them are tick box.
Excellent. Look, thank you so much for sharing your story and a bit about
Pleasure.
this project, Felicity. One of the things I love about it, and anything that comes up in this space, is when it's led by people with lived experience, because I think we come at it with a different intention, and I think it's received by people in a different way as well. And so I really love that about it, and that it's born from a need that you've recognised in your own experience as well. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
And I'll put the email address that Felicity mentioned before in the podcast notes, and it'll go up on our Facebook page and so on when we do our promotion as well of the episode. So meanwhile, though, if you have a story that you'd like to share and you'd like to be a guest on the Adopt Perspective podcast, just go to the Jigsaw Queensland website and you'll find a podcast tab. And if you scroll down there, you'll find a prospective guest form that you can fill in. And that will come through to me to be considered to be a guest on the podcast. And just remember that the podcast can be and is listened to by people all over the world. But thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. It's Jo Sparrow. I'm the president of Jigsaw Queensland and the host of Adopt Perspective. Bye for now.